Hi, welcome to Anchor Reviews. This is on Unscripted. This is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
And we are going to conclude Watchmen month by pretty much talking about anything that's related to Watchmen. Now, I reviewed the Watchmen graphic novel, the movie, and the video game, so I felt like this final month that Watchmen is turning 30 years old, I felt like we should talk about everything Watchmen related.
Yeah, it's definitely a wonderful, wonderful addition to the graphic novel medium, and as it's affiliated with, for accuracy or less accuracy, comic books. It has had a profound influence, and is absolutely worth revisiting.
I'm kind of surprised that the media hasn't really made a big deal, or even social media, by saying Watchmen is turning 30 years old this month. In a way, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, the most well-known and famous and most celebrated graphic novel of all time is really under the radar.
That is very peculiar. You're right. All I can think about maybe is, Alan Moore. He's just a very unpredictable person, and maybe he doesn't want a lot of attention towards it. But I don't know.
Well, not just that, but he's kind of disowned all movie adaptations of his work because he got film credit on From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. After that, he was like, screw it, I do not want my name on any of these projects, even though everyone going into it who knows this work knows that's his work. By the way, I mean, this is the kind of guy who worships a snake god that he made up in his own mind, and he's probably smoked so much weed and done so much drugs that he's kind of mentally not that stable in a way. But what do you think?
Well, he's definitely a strange individual. I don't want to speculate too much into, his personal life. I honestly had not heard the thing about the snake god he made up. Is that true or?
Well, according to honest trailers on Anchor Review, on Screen Junkies, they did so. But also another thing to bring up is that people usually joke that, Alan Moore is kind of like the British Frank Miller in a way because how many awesome graphic novels they've created.
Mhm.
But the thing is that someone made a joke about, okay, what if Alan Moore and Frank Miller worked on a project together, like a graphic novel? And they were joking like, okay, we got to create a female character, what should we do? Frank Miller would be like, oh, she's got to be a prostitute. And then Al Morris is like, oh, she has to be raped first before becoming a self-actual human being.
Right. Yeah, that does seem to be a trend in a lot of their,
A trope.
stories.
But yeah, it's like everyone makes a big deal about, oh, Frank Miller's misogyny, but no one brings up the whole it's okay rape stuff that goes on in Al Moore's things.
Yeah,
like
pulling
it's
a Brock Turner or something. Pretty crazy.
Or Jared Fogle, but
Yeah,
or Bill Cosby.
yes.
Or another
Cosby.
Bill, last name Clinton, but anyway, what happened was I'm really tempted to create a meme that showed from the film adaptation of Watchmen, showing the comedian and Silk Spectre like they were young, sitting with, near each other. And I was thinking about creating text saying, Watchmen, teaching people if you try to rape a woman, she'll fall in love with you.
Yeah, I mean that could be a very successful meme. I could see it.
I know, it's like, do you know what's something that's really messed up like that? I heard that Ray Rice, the girl he punched in the elevator,
Hmm.
I heard they're married now.
Well, that's one way of hitting on women.
Yeah, it's kind of like the equivalent of the comedian and Silk Spectre.
Yeah, that's true. No, let me clarify. I'm not, saying that that's a good thing. That's a punchline. But
So yeah, the graphic novel. Did you read the graphic novel or watch the movie first? Because for me, I watched the movie before reading the graphic novel.
for me, I actually heard about the movie first and started to read the graphic novel. Ultimately, didn't make it through before seeing the movie, so I saw the movie and then finished the graphic novel. And then I read the graphic novel again fairly recently, I'd say about 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, for our graphic novel class, shout out to Miss Hulkren.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I hope she's listening to this. Hopefully
Wonderful
she,
teacher.
yeah, definitely. And hopefully she doesn't really frown upon some of the raunchy stuff we're saying in this video, if she
Yeah,
made it this far.
right. But yeah, it's in both the graphic novel and in the film, I think, very great works. I consider the Watchmen film to be possibly Zack Snyder's greatest thing that he's ever done yet.
Agreed.
And it was just completely, you know, taken as a meh score from most people, which is pretty unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it just shows you how you can't take anything for granted from the establishment. If it's
Or credibility.
yeah, if it's good, they can take it as bad. If it's bad, it's golden, as long as it's made by the right people.
And with a certain agenda, it goes a long way, according to the Academy. But anyway, what I was saying was that I think we should try to backtrack to the novel, the graphic novel, before we get into the movie again.
Sure.
But yeah, what was outstanding about Watchmen, because I remember hearing about this graphic novel on the History Channel special for Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked, a documentary I highly recommend. For one, it's about real history, not dumb aliens. But also, the thing is that they did mention Watchmen, and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. So I watched the movie. I read the graphic novel later. I enjoyed both of them a lot. Now, Watchmen was groundbreaking at its time because no other kind of medium was like that, because, I mean, around the same time we had The Dark Knight Returns, but with Watchmen, it was like, wow, these superheroes we haven't seen these kind of depictions of them. Like, we had one that was like a murderer and rapist, we had kind of a psychopathic character, and so on and so forth.
Damaged people all around.
Yeah, and it showed superheroes in not just more realistic sense, but the same way, being metaphors for things that were going on at that time.
Yep. And at that time, I think it was, the
Part of the Cold War.
the Cold War they were emphasizing, especially, and they definitely referenced Vietnam, to be certain.
Yeah, and also they showed, like, I guess Watergate never happened, so Nixon was has like a third, fourth term. But for some reason, I guess they repealed the act originally under Harry Truman's administration, where it's like, okay, a president can only have 2 term limits. But somehow I guess they got rid of that. But Alan Moore is from Britain, so I'm not so sure if he exactly knew the political system, how it works in America.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, but I can definitely see where, a degree of assumption can occur if you're
A foreigner.
yeah, and trying to make a detailed story across cultures. I can definitely see that happening.
Yeah, it's like how some foreigners see our television, they think, oh, it's like America. They watch shows like House and they think, oh, our healthcare system is just fantastic and kind of magical. And they look at something like Jersey Shore and they think, oh, we just party all the time over here. Mm-hmm. And we're not all a bunch of, orange douchebags.
Well put.
Yeah.
Very well put.
Steroid-induced Oompa Loompas, but yeah.
Speaking of mutants and super zeros, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the only one that had superpowers is Dr. Manhattan, who, is a metaphor for, the nuclear bomb and also the arms race.
And is, by the way, the most broken superhero in terms of, like, absolutely crazy power level. You talk about Superman being unfair.
Or Martian Manhunter.
Whoa! Dr. Manhattan could just literally phase them out of existence. And, huge extents of the DC and Marvel universe. Goodbye. The end.
I heard recently in the comics that Dr. Manhattan recreated the DC universe.
Yeah.
He created that reboot, like, for example, characters like the Comedian turned to, like, I guess, references like the Joker and Rorschach and Night Owl are kind of like Batman and so on and so forth. But anyway, we got the movie Watchmen, which was in development hell since the 80s and it bounced around from director to director. Like, I think Tim Burton and Michael Bay showed interest, but they eventually went with Zack Snyder.
Yeah, hearing about that, Zack Snyder was the right choice for that. He really nailed it. He did it with people who weren't even known.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
looked a lot like the characters that they were playing.
these actors looked like the characters they were playing. They nailed. Well, I would argue most nailed their performances. I guess.
Except for Malin Ackerman as Silk Spectre, the
Yeah,
second.
I agree. That was the exception that I was thinking of. But overall, just bravo, on all of that. And while I think Tim Burton definitely has a interesting, take on certain characters like his Batman series
Yeah, his first two.
and for that matter, things like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Well, he
You know,
didn't direct that one. He wrote it and produced it, but he did not direct that one.
gotcha.
He was too busy directing Batman Returns at the time, so he couldn't.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's him, and then there's Michael Bay, who are now known and really good picks for things like Transformers and war movies. That just really doesn't fit in the tone.
Yeah, recommend 13 Hours.
Absolutely. Those just you can see they wouldn't fit that style. It would be a very big miscast, I think, to or misdirection to choose one of them as a director. And Zack Snyder really hit it home. He wasn't afraid to be dark with it. Take the hint, Marvel. And
and this one person we know that constantly plays prosecutor every time we say something positive about DC, and always plays defense attorney every time we defend Marvel.
Tis true. Tis true.
We're not gonna say his name, but
no.
You know who you are.
Yeah. But yeah. Watchmen is a profound work. So I guess we're talking about the graphic novels. We keep moving to the movie.
Yeah, we're talking about the movie right now. I will say that the best casting in this movie and the acting was Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach.
He was fantastic.
Yeah, some people thought that his growly voice was like Christian Bale's Batman, but it's kind of like what Rorschach would sound like because we read the graphic novel. His dialogue seems kind of rough and muffly, but also
Journal, October 12th.
What I like about Zack Snyder, how he really appreciates source material and detail, is he hired the graphic novel designer Dave Gibbons from the graphic novel to work on the movie, so when they're looking at scenes with Rorschach, how his masks move, they're trying to match what it was like in the graphic novel. Because Rorschach's, different designs on his face kind of reflects his emotions and what he's seen and that sort of thing, which is awesome.
Yep. And, yeah, I mean, that was just... the style in it was fantastic, and I love how Zack Snyder, in his works, even things like Sucker Punch, which is some of the low points.
Definitely his worst movie.
Yeah. The comic books graphic novel style, he absolutely nails. You can even see rhythm in the movement of these, characters that he puts on screen. So he really is, to me, the definitive go-to graphic novel
comic book director. Besides Nolan, but
Yeah,
he
that's true.
just did Batman.
And that's a different take. That's like a realism versus comic book adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, Zack Snyder got his feet wet with graphic novels with 300 a few years before, which I love how in the opening to the movie, the comedian's apartment number is 300.
That was great.
Yeah, that opening segment was awesome. We only saw brief glimpses of that in the graphic novel. In this one, the prologue scene, we see the comedian die, which was an awesome scene.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And straight from the graphic novel.
Having one of the best slow-mo shots in any movie I've seen, one of the best slow-mo shots I've seen, is him being thrown through the glass window.
Mm-hmm.
Is an iconic shot.
Absolutely. And the human being juice that followed.
Yeah.
As Rorschach would say. But
Yeah. The actor who plays the comedian in this movie was Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Yep, and he was also, I think, Batman's dad in Batman vs. Superman.
Yeah, in this one we have Carla Junico, or I keep messing up her last name. Gugino.
Gugino, I think it is.
something. I think it might be Italian.
Mm.
But anyway, she has been in a lot of graphic novel movies. She was in Sin City as Mickey Rourke's character's like parole officer. The one, she's at nighttime and he comes in to get the medication, that sort of thing.
Mm.
And then I guess, besides this one, she was also in Sucker Punch. She's been in the DC universe as the kind of voice character for kind of like the Kryptonian Siri in a way. But yeah, just seeing her in the movie, I'm like, okay, really good casting choice. But yeah, that moment when the comedian tries to have his way with Silk Spectre, in a way is very intense. I liked how there wasn't any music during that scene. It was just silent.
Yeah.
And made it more intense. And then, the Hooded Justice comes in and stops it. And then comedian says, "This is what turns you on." I have kind of a theory recently about that may have not have happened because the fact that why would someone like Silk Spectre love and sleep with a man that tried to rape her a while back, and it just kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's kind of what? In a way, but I have an idea that the Hooded Justice may have made that story up to get the comedian out because the comedian knew that the Hooded Justice was gay and he would easily get kicked out of the society of, heroes. They knew that he was gay, so he created this story, I guess, to try to get him out of the picture.
That is a very interesting theory.
I just thought of it a few days ago. I was just thinking about it.
And I could see that absolutely between the comedian and Hooded Justice. For Silk Spectre, though, I do think it could be a, I've forgotten what you call it, but basically where you're in denial of an abusive relationship. Kind of similar to Harley Quinn's situation.
Yeah, this was before Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I've forgotten exactly what that condition is called. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Not Stockholm Syndrome?
No, it's similar to that. But,
yeah.
In any case.
It's kind of like the cheerleader falling for the abusive jock.
Right. Imagine that. But, that I think that's what I took was happening. And didn't think of it any further than that. But that is a very interesting theory.
Yeah. And in addition, we also had the only actor I recognized when this movie came out was Patrick Wilson as Night Owl.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the Conjuring movies and Insidious movies, and I felt like he was good in this one. I felt like the costume looked better in a way. Like, I mean, if you look at the costume in the graphic novel, it looks too owlish looking. Like it would be kind of impractical in live action for him to move around in that.
Mm-hmm. Then again, some of Batman's suits, which he looks very similar to, can look impractical in certain lights too. So.
Yeah, in a way. Mm-hmm. But also, we'll save the Doctor for last. Mm-hmm. But we had Matthew Good as Ozymandias, and I liked how when we go to his place, we see the statue of "I am Ozymandias, ye mighty in despair" kind of speech.
Mm-hmm. He was fantastic too. I would argue he might be the second or third best of all the characters in it that were presented in the film.
Yeah, this is definitely better than that really bad chick flick movie he was with Amy Adams called Leap Year.
No kidding. I think he's also in Downton Abbey that I've seen.
Downtown Abbey?
Yeah, that I've seen over the shoulder as, I've seen older people watch it. But,
and girls around our age.
Yeah, that's true. Trying to seem mature. But, this is the role I recognize him in and is going to be the role to beat. For him. Why don't we talk a little bit, though? I know you want to talk about the cast, but let's talk about what things did you and I personally think were improvements and improvements or weaknesses between the graphic novel medium and the film.
I do want to get to that, but I just wanted to get with the cast done because we only have 2 more I want to talk about.
Sure.
But I definitely want to get to that. Milan Ackerman plays Silk Spectre, the second one, And yeah, she was probably the weakest actress in this movie. Some people went as far by saying that she was kind of like Keanu Reeves in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where everyone else had like a top-notch performance like Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, and Anthony Hopkins, and he was the weak link in that chain.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, I guess, a weak link in that chain. You know, some people were probably too busy looking at her really skin-tight leather outfit to really care about.
Which, to be fair, is what a lot of, films can only hope for, is that their weakest link is dressed up and you don't notice it.
Yeah, like Denise Richards in The World's Not Enough, that James Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan, where she plays a nuclear physicist in that one. Yeah, that's what it was. I'm trying to remember now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a James Bond movie. It's not very plausible whatsoever. And yeah, you kind of distracted with her wearing a, kind of tank top shirt looking thing going on, whatever that clothing is. I'm not an expert on that, but anyway, yeah, she was fine for what she did. But the one I think stole the show besides Rorschach was Dr. Manhattan, played by Billy Crudup.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was awesome. I loved how he had a very soft voice like this one.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the stars, they're pretty much like photographs from the past.
Yeah, he, in both the graphic novel and the film, yet again for the umpteenth time I'll say, is a great character. And some people very much underappreciate him. I personally have a philosophical view.
Me too,
that,
in a way.
Is very much in line with that detached perspective from, whether it be culture, the species, whatever, that, lets you get a better angle and not buy into so many of the, cliches and things that are taken for granted. That is very informative. It actually started with this, I think, and was nurtured with people like George Carlin's skepticism. But,
Yeah.
His power and his character before that being the son of a clockmaker and working as a scientist really made sense for that logical dissection of reality that he had as a power, and that was very much a characteristic in his cognitive function.
Yeah. But also, in a way, I felt like his skepticism for humanity was influenced by the comedian, because there's a part where they're in Vietnam and they're celebrating, and this pregnant Vietnamese woman says to him, like, "Oh, I'm pregnant with your child." And he's like, "Whatever, go away." And she's like, "You're not gonna brush me off." So she breaks a bottle, slashes his face, and he gets the gun out, and Manhattan's like, "Don't do it," and he shoots and kills her. "Oh yeah? Well, you could have stopped me. I mean, you could have turned the broken bottle to like snowflakes or something like that. You could have stopped the bullets. You could have teleported us to like a different country, but you didn't." And I feel like that's very much relatable to, especially like recent years, like people say, "Oh, look at this tragedy," or whatever, or this kind of thing overseas that we see in a different country. But yet at the same time, it's like, you could have done something to stop this. I mean, yeah, that person is to blame, but there was time you had the power to do something and stop something, but you're as guilty as I am. Kind of like when we see maybe someone getting robbed or beaten up. Usually we have the bystander effect. We're just watching from distance. We don't want to intervene in a way.
Yeah, and there is some truth to that. I've always found that argument, though, to be part of the reason, of the comedian's ultimate fall is...
No pun intended?
Yeah, no pun intended, right. And, there is something to be said about that, he could have intervened, and it can relate to the real world, but there is an element of that, if he... I feel there is an example where, even though that's a good point, it's like, yeah, even though, he didn't stop you, but it's not his mistake ultimately. You are the one who made it, so don't drag everyone down with you because you think that you can, just make the statement by doing something horrific and then say everyone else is the bad guy, I'm fine. That's kind of like some of the Joker's logic, which there's a certain degree of truth to it, but it only goes so far.
But also with his skepticism, we see him like stopping, a riot and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking to myself watching this recently, I'm like, man, I wish we had the comedian stop all the BLM thing going on. But also, Night Owl's like, what the hell happened? What happened to the American dream? You look at it, it came true.
That was
And
beautiful.
yeah, that's in a way how the American dream was created by the greatest generation when they came back from the war. They wanted everything to be fine because they grew up in depression and war. And the baby boomer generation during this time were so coddled that they didn't know hardships. So they delved kind of into social Marxism in a way with the hippie movement and so on. And things started to go downhill with society in general during that time, especially during the 60s and 70s. We had JFK assassination and all the other things that Americans were very iffy about their country. All the way up until Reagan became president, it started to make, Americans feel good about being an American again. But at the same time, in a way, it's kind of, I kind of look at how one generation that's good, the generation afterwards is not so good, and then, it kind of repeats itself over and over.
I can kind of see that. There's some loopholes in, or plot holes in, that narrative that was created, but I see what you're getting at there. One thing I gotta say is, I try to bite my tongue on this, but, the older generations do like to call the millennials out on being narcissistic, yet they are members of what they themselves call the greatest generation. Cut that shit out, would you please?
Yeah.
Like, we understand that you deserve your pats on the back, but talk about narcissism, calling yourself the greatest, please.
Yeah, really, the ones that grew up during the Depression and fought in World War II, that is the greatest generation. That, truly is. Anyone born between, I think it was 1920 as youngest. I gotta look and see what the youngest, farthest back in time. And think anyone born at the latest 1944 is considered the greatest generation. Baby boomers are like 1945 to 1965. But anyway, back to the movie itself. Besides the opening segment of seeing the comedian getting killed and also the opening credit scene on its take on history, I think my favorite scene in the entire movie is showing Dr. Manhattan's origin story. Amazing editing, effects, and the soundtrack and that sort of thing is amazing. There's so many emotions that this soundtrack gives to many people. And yeah, I love this scene. I think it's one of the best movie scenes I've seen in my life.
The soundtrack was amazing, and it introduced me to the band Muse, which is currently
well, that was in the
my
trailer.
favorite. Yeah, no, I understand that, but even to go along with that, there's the score and the soundtrack. They're kind of, separate things technically, but still go into the final product. And, this is just another area where Watchmen just hit it home with me, and I really owe that film for that.
Yeah, another great musical number, song choice was Jimi Hendrix All Alone in the Watchtower.
Mm-hmm.
When they're going to find... I felt like that song was very influential on the plot of the movie in a way because we got the Joker to the thief and he's saying life is just a joke, which is, the comedian's kind of catchphrase in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to the Watchtower, which is kind of like Ozymandias' lair. But also I liked My Chemical Romance's cover on Desolation Row, which was referenced in the graphic novel itself. And I love the quote that Rorschach has, a couple of things, like he's really crass, but very strict, which I really like. I tend to side with Rorschach. He's been evaluated by a psychiatrist, like, why don't you like me? You're fat.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of people laughing, like, when that happened, but also when they break him out of jail, he's what, Night Owl's with Silk Spectre, and Rorschach's like, nothing like a pair of legs to get you motivated back into action. Well, then again, that's a legitimate reason. The power of boners, ladies and gentlemen, is a force to be reckoned with.
Real talk.
The power of love is really powerful, but yeah, the power of boners is definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Yes. Breed it and weep.
Yeah, just look at the Trojan War. According to legend. But anyway, anyone would be mad if their wife got taken by some pretty boy wannabe who's not that good of an actor, just getting by his looks. Orlando Bloom.
Get wrecked. By the way, why... I seriously don't understand this. This is a bit of a tangent. Why on earth would a condom brand name themselves after something that, you know, entered, a kingdom and then, ultimately, uh, I guess, let out what it was holding? That seems to me like a bad analogy for
Yeah.
what they're trying to get.
I'm trying to think what else I want to talk about this movie, but yeah, it's very violent in a way.
Absolutely.
Like we see like people's fingers getting blown off. We see Rorschach killing this child killer with a cleaver, like multiple times to the head. But the court system's like, oh, maybe life sentence or lethal injection. We gotta make sure that needle is cleansed so much, even though we're gonna kill them,
Right.
which is totally backwards
Absolutely.
of the
ridiculous.
justice system. I'll let you go for a little bit.
Sure. Well, I guess we're kind of expanding here into the actual narrative, and there, I would want to compare a little bit into, the graphic novel versus the film. And there are things I really like about both. I am one of those rare birds, for better or worse, that we'll talk about. And I don't know why I called myself a bird in that situation, but
Bird's a word about the
yes,
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane's gonna run that into the ground like the chicken fights.
absolutely. But I actually, in this situation, preferred um, the film adaptation
Me too.
for some of its realism choices to the graphic novel. And here's where a lot of butthurt graphic novelist fans click off. I apologize.
If
But
they haven't before.
yes, but you know, some of the main differences that strike me, of course, one of the big ones is throughout the graphic novel, between the chapters, they show, basically the bios of the old Watchmen, before Dr. Manhattan, and um, that did add a lot of detail and background, which was good, and some of it was shown, in the film, but ultimately a good portion of it had to be sacrificed. And even with the director's cut, where they added some of that stuff back, there was just so much content with that, and how exactly would you depict it without having some guy just sit in a chair and read the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with adaptations in general, is that either you have to be faithful to it to a fault where it becomes kind of boring, or do you cut stuff out and risk,
Criticism.
people who are fans of that source material complain about, oh, it's not faithful to it. People said, like, oh, the motion comic is amazing. I tried to watch that, but I couldn't. You know why?
Was it?
There's only one voice actor, narrator in the entire thing.
Yeah, that is pretty garbage.
Hi. Eddie? What the hell are you doing here? You knew I was changing. Sure I did. You announced it loud enough.
It's like, you could not afford more than one voice actor. It's really awful when they're trying to voice like a female character. It's kind of like, hey, I saw you. You knew I was getting undressed. In a really bad way, where it's like, my God.
Click. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that there's been other motion graphic novels like Batman Mad Love and also Superman Red Sun. They're also DC properties, not as well known as Watchmen, but those had multiple voice actors. They had the decency to do that, but for some reason this one couldn't have more than just one person. I mean, I can understand if they got Alan Moore to narrate that. That'd be kind of weird, but awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two things I think is better about this movie than the graphic novel is one is the press conference scene when Dr. Manhattan is being interviewed and is like, do you give these people cancer? And then his ex-wife comes in, Janie. In the graphic novel, she wasn't there, but her being there to make a scene about, she's gotten cancer. And that was very emotional, and that made a lot more sense.
Yes.
Why he would get emotionally stirred of her physically being there. The other thing I felt like was better than this one than the graphic novel was how the New Yorkers die in the climax.
Absolutely.
Like in the graphic novel is a giant alien squid thing.
Yeah, I think the logic was they were somehow, like, similarly to the film, they were siphoning off Dr. Manhattan's creative energy except in the context of the film, they used it for explosions or a bomb, which
Yeah,
is much more practical.
Yeah, it made more sense. Like, what makes more sense to frame Dr. Manhattan with? A giant mutant alien squid thing or a giant blue explosion?
And the point
What
that,
makes more sense?
yeah, seriously, and a point that I get that the, you know, graphic novel purists will, argue to death is, that, well, that really drives the point home of, it's, they see an entity, the psychic squid that just dies as soon as it comes into existence in our reality because it wasn't in the water or whatever. That, when there's a physical creature, it kind of drove home the idea of making an outside force the enemy so that the world comes together to fight it. But even in the film, they just turned Dr. Manhattan into that, and that made so much more sense.
Yeah.
It's an enemy you certainly wouldn't want to pick a fight with.
I know,
But-
it's kind of like, how am I going to frame the Hamburglar? Am I going to, get a bunch of stolen hamburgers onto his porch? Or am I going to give some philosophical, weird creature thing that has no connection to him whatsoever?
Or tangible connection on, the surface level at least.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. But besides the movie, what about, while we're wrapping up, we gotta talk about the video game Watchmen, The End is Nigh, if you played that one.
Hold up, though. I do want to mention about the movie just real quick.
Okay.
One of my few things. One of the few small little changes that I kind of do wish they would have put in the film as opposed to keeping it out for the graphic novel. And it still was great. I don't want to, underplay it at all. But there was a part in the end where basically, Ozymandias was confronted by, Dr. Manhattan, just like in the film, and with Night Owl and Rorschach there. But in the confrontation, basically, everyone, just said, well, okay, we'll let the lie go through, and that's that. And then the rest of the story played out pretty much the same. But in the graphic novel, Ozymandias kind of stops Dr. Manhattan as he's leaving and says, in the end, did I do the right thing? As if he's talking to God. And he says, oh, Ozymandias, there is no end. And leaves, and they kind of end, his part of the story with kind of this broken look of, oh shit, I did something wrong.
Or
that was very powerful, and I guess you could argue some of that could still be felt in how they shot the film and used music, but that would have been a good addition, I think, to the very end that would have hit a little harder.
yeah, I think the whole ultimate thing about Watchmen, about what happens at the end, is like, okay, do we live in a pleasant, comfortable lie, or do we live in a harsh reality full of truths?
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And it's a good question for now, too. I mean,
Well, anytime, I think, in history. But talking about the video game Watchmen, The End is Nigh, have you played that one?
honestly, I have not. I've seen some gameplay of it, and I've, been fascinated at what I've seen, but have you played it, Tyler?
I recommended to rent it. I would say I only would recommend the PS3 version because it includes a Blu-ray copy of the movie Watchmen. It means the game is kind of like the Batman Arkham games when it comes to some of this combat, but it's definitely not as fluent or as well done. I mean, the combat is kind of basic in a way. I mean, I'll show you the review later, but the thing is, like, you show, like, the different, like, characters when you click and select them, like you want to play as like Night Owl, Rorschach. And the show Rorschach, he's doing like this, it's like kind of like a dance thing, like pick me, pick me, pick me, in a way, and that was really silly, in my opinion.
Like the Harry Partridge depiction of Watchmen, Saturday morning Watchmen.
Oh yeah, I remember that. But have you seen the one where it showed the Dr. Manhattan video game where he's got like a giant blue penis and
Yeah.
hitting people? Oh, speaking of, I'm wondering who was the person that had to render Dr. Manhattan's junk in that movie? Someone had to spend a lot of time rendering that.
Yeah, I bet they either got numb to the concept of penises over that time or were really into them.
Yeah, hopefully it was like a woman doing that, because that'd be torture for a straight guy.
Straight guy, true. I mean, it is an industry, though, where there are some, of different angles.
Like Ozymandias. But also, the thing was that it was kind of like, the Dante's Inferno video game, like the final boss. He's fighting Satan, and, he's letting it all hang out. And it's like, yeah, someone had to render that too. It's like coming home for the holidays. And like, so, son, daughter, what'd you do? What's the highlight of your last time I saw you?
Career.
I had to render a blue man's genitals for hours on end.
Applause.
Yeah, I heard that Kate Beckinsale is still embarrassed every time she's around, like, Thanksgiving, Christmas time. Her relatives joke, like, oh, you're still in those Underworld movies? Yeah, there's a new one coming out called Blood Wars.
How long are they going to keep those coming out? Speaking of, like, Fast and the Furious being
Well, as long as Kate Beckinsale has her looks, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Which has lasted a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
She's,
argument.
like, in her early 40s. In a way, but they could probably CG it up if something starts to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I will say that I really enjoyed Watchmen month. I really enjoyed everything that I did with it, as well as, Steven's here to comment on it because he wanted to review the thing as well, but I felt like this would be a good time to review everything Watchmen related, not just the movie itself.
Absolutely. I'm really thankful to be a part of this to, give my 20 cents on the subject. And Tyler, thank you very much for having me on this.
Yep.
For this.
And my 80 cents, so it makes it $1.
That's right.
Yeah. Because I do most of the work on this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're important too, Steven, when you're around.
Gosh.
Oh, gosh. That was Bashful from Snow White and Seven Dwarfs.
Yep, Goofy movie coming next. No.
Yeah, hopefully they do not make a live-action remake of the Goofy movie.
That would be horrifying.
Yeah, have you seen the cosplay for Max?
No.
It's like,
I'm
my
worried.
God.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out and possibly call for a restraining order against anyone who wears that.
Yeah, really. So, thank you for watching this episode of Unscripted on Anchor Reviews. This is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
And we hope you enjoyed Watchmen Month, and I hope you look at other videos on my channel. And please like and subscribe.
So how does it sound?
Wait, what do you say?
So how does it sound?
Maybe I'll put that at the post-end credits.